welcome to the D3D4 Football Podcast with me, your host, James Richards. Hello everyone, welcome back to the first proper D3D4 Football Podcast of the new campaign. If you are not aware of what this podcast is, it is our League 2 preview podcast where we go through every side in the division, picking where we think they will finish from 24 up to first. It's taken us a little while to agree on the picks. The three of us here today, who I'll introduce the other two shortly. But if you like what we produce as a team, if you like D3D4 football, then you can become a patron and support us throughout the coming campaign, where we have hopefully lots of new, exciting, and well, maybe we hope interesting things lined up for you. So looking forward to bringing that to you. But I am joined by Luke Saunders, as always, for this podcast. How you doing, Luke?
Not too bad, thank you. Looking forward to this. So it's that time of year where you can be optimistic before it all fizzles away.
Yeah, we know the feeling. Us three on this pod. The third string to this bow is Chris Stringer. Welcome back, Chris, again for another pod.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. I don't quite share Luke's optimism. It's been drilled out of me as an Oldham fan.
Yeah, 21 years in the League One to then get relegated.
Yeah,
not great. Not great. I'm an Oxford fan, so yeah, every yellow will tell you it's not been fun for most of the... We had a brief spell under Appleton, which was delightful, but it just doesn't seem to be quite as bonny under Carl Robinson. The interesting thing about this podcast, though, and difference compared to last season, is, of course, the transfer window shuts in September for League 1 and 2 sides. So all our picks are based on the squads as they stand at the moment. A lot could still change, but without further ado, let's jump into our League 2 preview. League 2. And Luke, you're going to kick us off. Who do we think will finish bottom of League 2 in 2019-20?
Well, sorry, Macclesfield fans, but this may not be perhaps a surprise given the current financial plight. But yes, it's the Silkmen, Macclesfield. We've gone to finish bottom. It's a highly competitive division this year, and I think with current situations going on there, with unpaid wages, in the sense for, current players and a lot of players that have left. I mean, losing Harry Smith to Northampton, he's a big player, in many senses for them, and they lost him early on in the window. I think they got a little bit of money for him, but again, it would rarely plug a big financial gap for them. So, and Scott Wilson's recently joined Oldham, and he was quite a sharp player last season, and Callum Evans as well. So, yeah, it's a difficult one. They have brought in a few signings, but for me, it's the immediate future of the football club that's going to play a big part in their season. And even if they had no financial problems, I think we'd all agree that they'd still probably struggle with the squad they've got. So, yeah, that's why I think we all agreed that they would be bottom of the league.
Yeah, I think so. I think Zach Jules as well has gone to Walsall today, so that's another defender out of the club. Elliot Jarrell does not appear to be re-signing with them, and is being looked at by at least 2 or 3 teams we know of. So, that's another key player from last season who they have lost. And the interesting thing is they may not even be able to, as far as I understand it, register the new players they've signed because they still owe previous players at least 2 to 3 months' wages. And I was informed it's around the 14th of August that their owner has to pay them. So if he doesn't pay them, then I do not know what the future holds for the club, so it's pretty serious stuff, but I think it will be a season of struggle for Macclesfield. In 23rd place, Chris, who have we put in 23rd? Who's joining Macclesfield in relegation this season, in our opinion?
Well, it looks like it's going to be Cambridge, I think. They don't seem to have anyone in the team that's going to get them the goals that they really need. I still don't think they've got really enough in midfield, personally, and it's going to be a real season of struggle for them. I think Dan Jones might be able to do something at left back, but I don't see enough quality in that team.
I think a lot will rely on how well Harvey Nibbs, the Aston Villa youth product, does. I mean, he's a raw talent. He's highly thought of by Colin Calderwood, who thinks he'll do a lot better than a lot of people expect. But, their head of recruitment is still very much in the search for 2 strikers. And with their budget, I think they'll struggle. I mean, the fact they've let Giovanni Brown go for a decent fee, nonetheless, it's a sign of the sort of times at Cambridge where they need to bring in the money. His departure perhaps could fund 3 new signings. They do have a few players on trial at the moment. George Maris is expected, as we speak, to sign a new contract. That's not been confirmed. And so, yeah, I think it's very interesting to see how they do. To be honest, I'm not enamoured by any of the sort of new signs they brought in. I think Carl Knowles a decent player. Luke Hannant, not too bad, brought in from Port Vale, but without strikers and with Gary Deegan, obviously a midfielder of pretty big influence, out for an indefinite amount of time with this illness that he's been reported to have. I think it will be a season of struggle for Cambridge. And I think their fans, the ones I've spoken to, certainly seem a bit jaded by the whole thing right now. So no surprises for me or for any of us, I think, if Cambridge really struggled. One team that we also predict to struggle, and we've put them down to come 22nd in our league table, is Crawley Town. Now, Crawley Town are an interesting team because we know they're not going to be the biggest, they're not going to get the biggest crowds, but they went for an interesting choice in Gabriele Cioffi last season as a manager. And to be fair, I think you guys might agree with me, it just didn't seem to pan out. They had real struggles in the second half of the season. That form was dreadful. Looking at the signings they brought in, Luke, what do you make of them? I mean, Ashley Nadedson is the one that stands out, but reports his fitness is not great for the start of the season. And a couple of others which, again, from non-league and from Birmingham City, who could do well, but again, it doesn't strike me as being something you can reliably fall back on.
No, absolutely. I think Nadesson would have probably been their standout signing of the summer, and it was a strange one because last season, Cioffi tried a few things. He tried lining them up and celebrating in front of the fans like they do in big European clubs, and things, it never really got going really for him. He had a couple of surprise results. He got a good win at Lincoln, I seem to remember, but they did finish the season in pretty poor form. So yeah, it's no surprise that we put them down here. I like the look of Labalo. I've heard a lot of good things about him. He also played well against Cheltenham in pre-season last year. Birmingham is an exciting young player. Maybe a little bit of that sort of injection they need. They've had a couple of good young players like Nathaniel George that have played well for them, so maybe he can be in that sort of mould. But yeah, it's a tough one. Tunnicliffe is another one that I quite like as a signing because he did really well with Fylde, but in the National League. But as we've all unanimously agreed, it's probably going to be another season of struggle for Crawley Town. So yeah, this is a tough one.
It is indeed. In 21st place, Luke, who have we got there?
So we've gone for Morecambe. So I think it's fair to say we're not. Every year everyone seems to write them off, or we're not writing them off. They're going to stay up again, in our opinion here, because the brilliant job that Jim Bentley does down there, or should I say up there. So I have been, the one thing that I have been impressed, and I think I mentioned on previous podcasts, sort of leading up to this season with you, James, is the sort of business that Bentley does with the limited resources he has. Now, losing Aaron Collins, I think he had 8 goals in 15 games at the end of last season, to Forest Green, it was kind of inevitable he was going to go. And Zach Mills, a really good player, really highly rated, obviously, to Oldham. 2 really good players leaving, but he hasn't sort of messed around in the transfer market. But there's a few experienced players in there. I like the signing of O'Sullivan. I think Miller from Crewe. There's every now and then he has a really good performance, Miller, so he could bring them something. And Buxton is a really solid, fullback, despite perhaps not having the pace. So I think the thing with Morecambe is they always seem to dog it out up there, and there's a really close-knit group. We all know Kevin Ellison well on this podcast, and I think that they're a really tight club, and they do things the right way with the limited resources. So I think 21st. For me, for Morecambe, 21st, I would say they'd probably bite your hand off for it, wouldn't they? Because it'll be another year in the Football League and a well-earned year at that.
Yeah, I think with the resources and the lack of training facilities and all the stuff that comes with being Morecambe manager, Jim Bentley does a fantastic job year in, year out. And there could be a couple more surprises in that transfer window yet to come. In 20th, who have we got in 20th, Chris?
We've gone Leyton Orient. They're a side that I'd personally love to see do very, very well, but they've obviously had the really tragic loss of their manager, Justin Edinburgh. They've not been able to hold on to a couple of key players. Macaulay Bond's gone to Charlton, Josh Cromer to Huddersfield. And in sort of bolster their attack, they've brought Connor Wilkinson and Lee Angle. On paper, that could, be excellent for them, but they are sort of very quite hit and miss, I think, personally. So I think they've got enough about them to stay up, but I'm not sure there'll be too much excitement beyond staying in the league.
Yeah, I think you mentioned when we were deciding where our picks would be, the loss of Justin Edinburgh could really be something that unites the team and gives them that sort of push to do a bit better. I think as well, though, something like that in pre-season in a competitive division like League Two could also have a hugely negative effect on the way you recruit, the way you prepare for the season. I mean, Josh Wright coming in, he's an experienced midfielder, and he'll be a good signing. And like you say, I think they've got enough in their squad probably not to worry too much about relegation. But there's not perhaps enough there for me to get too excited about them coming straight back in the league and doing like a Tranmere or something like that from last season. So I think they'll be solid enough, but I just think they might have had their pre-season derailed somewhat by that tragic loss of a man that I think everyone paid massive respects to for being such a great guy in Justin Edinburgh. In 19th, we have got Grimsby Town. Now, Grimsby are an interesting case because they're a club I've long admired. They're a club that I really have fond memories of watching in the Championship. But the reason, and the one reason alone, that I am not yet convinced that they will push on too much from last season is, yes, they've signed 3 good strikers in Matt Green, James Hansen, and slightly unknown quantity of Moses Ugbu, who looks a very good player from the footage I've seen of him during his time in Sweden, is I'm not convinced they've got enough creativity. You know, you can have 3 excellent strikers in a team, and we saw some really good strikers actually at Notts County last season, but they just weren't fed enough good quality. And that's something I'm worried about. I hope that Michael Jolly will address that. I think he's an excellent coach and deserves all the opportunities. Of course, they've had the off-the-field issues with the takeover that hasn't apparently gone through. Not quite sure where that stands right now, but at this moment in time, obviously they're trying to sign Cameron Dummigan. If they can get him in and have him on one side and Liam Gibson on the other, it'll be quite an interesting sort of wing-back pairing if that's how he plays, if he goes for the sort of 3 at the back again. But I don't know what you think, Chris. A bit of creativity with Embleton not there this season. I really feel that's what they need.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Dummigan would certainly be an excellent addition, and I think he'd give more going forwards than he would at the back. But the same problem exists for Grimsby. I just don't think they've got enough going forwards. Last season they relied too much on their defence and their
James
goalkeeper.
McKeown in particular,
yeah, I was about to say, James McKeown had a magnificent season for them. They just weren't getting the goals up the other end of the pitch to move up into sort of the higher regions of the league that they probably should have been able to get into. I think that it's another season of struggle, but like Orient, I don't think they're poor enough to go down.
No, so we've got Grimsby in 19th. Like I said, with Grimsby, though, there could be a bit of business yet to be done. But as it stands, they just don't. Their shot data last season wasn't good enough, and I don't think we'll see a huge improvement unless they bring in a little bit more creativity into the side. Though, good to see Elliot Whitehouse back. Hopefully he can stay fit this season because he's a pretty dynamic player. Right, in 18th. Who have we got in 18th, Luke?
We've got Port Vale in 18th. So, yeah, the Valiants. They got a bit of business done early in this transfer window, actually, which is good to see. Been a club that, they've obviously been in League One before, and they've been pushing quite high, but it's been a tough few years for them. And it was really good to see, actually. I think in pre-season, early pre-season, they quite quickly started selling season tickets, and I think the sales have gone pretty well. Which is good to see. There's a good spine in that team. You've got Scott Brown in goal, someone, know very well from his time at Cheltenham. Great goalkeeper, who was really good for them last season. And, any team with Tom Pope up front still, that probably in terms of, I think, you put some stats out, a few weeks ago that showed that he was by and large the best sort of aerial challenge winning striker in the division. And when you've got someone like him in the team, you've always got a chance, but their signings, they've been okay. I think Richie Bennett from Carlisle's an interesting one. I thought he'd stay in the league after a little spell at Morecambe. He's another. I don't know if he offers something much different to Pope, but Cullen certainly does. I think when he's on form, Mark Cullen, there was a time that he's been at Luton. He was doing well at Blackpool for a spell. He could be one of their better signings in the window. And the others, David and Moo, again, bit hit and miss at Cambridge. I'd say it's been a steady window for Port Vale, but nothing that really excites, and therefore pretty much justifies why we've put them in 18th place.
Yeah, I think it's great to see the club taken over, by the way. Norman Smurthwaite at the back of him is probably the most welcome sight that any Valiants fans have seen. I think it'll just take a little bit of time and a little bit of a period of transition. It's difficult to quickly turn things around. Personally, I think the best thing they did was give John Askey a new contract. I'm a big fan of his, and I think his football at the end of last season proved that he's got some real talent, and he can affect the way they play, and he can try and get them playing more attacking. Mark Cullen, like Luke said, good signing if he stays fit, of course. He'll be a big player. But yeah, no, I think overall they've done well in the window. Probably again a couple more to come in, but a solid season for Port Vale, and hopefully they won't be anywhere near relegation, but we've got them as it stands in 18th. In 17th, who have we got in 17th, Chris?
Well, it's going to be another depressing season for Scunthorpe, I think, purely on the basis that I don't think they've improved the squad as they really need to compete in League Two. They've lost a couple of players, so Charlie Good's gone to Northampton, Ojo to Aberdeen, and Burgess to Salford. But I'm looking down the list of the players they've brought in, and no one particularly excites me. Andy Butler from Doncaster, he's got a bit about him, but he's 35 now, so I suppose there's questions around that. And it really is just a case that Oldham learnt this last season. If you're going to compete in League Two, you do still need quality, and that Scunthorpe team is really calling out for some good quality players, and they haven't got that.
No, I agree. I think they're going to struggle. I think Paul Hurst is a good coach, and the high press is very important in his system. Jan Songo'o, like him, I think he's a good signing. Alex Gilead, Shrewsbury fans would tell you, was terribly hit and miss last season. Andy Butler is a very good defender. I know he's fitness troubles in pre-season at the moment, but I think he's a good leader. But they've lost Funzo Ojo, who is probably their best player. And Josh Morris has gone, of course, as well. He's now in League One again with Fleetwood. So they lack that creativity. Paul Hurst hoping to bring in a few bodies, mostly on loan though. And obviously they've had this period in League One where they've perhaps overspent a little bit, so they might be tightening their belt, having come down as they chased the Championship dream and didn't quite make it. And it's kind of all gone horribly wrong. But yeah, I agree with you, Chris. I think there's not quite enough quality. Ryan Colclough, love that guy. I think he's a brilliant player. Fitness-wise, I don't know where he is currently. I was led to believe he's going to miss the start of the season, but he is probably one of the brightest prospects on his day that League Two will see next season, and I just hope he gets himself fit and can compete. But yeah, I think Scunthorpe will find it another tricky season, and it will take them a little while to under Paul Hurst to sort of move back up to where they want to be. So yeah, we have Scunthorpe in 17th. In 16th, we have the Saddlers. We have Walsall. Again, a new manager, but coming down into a division where you do need quality to be successful. I think the Saddlers are perhaps just a little bit short. Having seen some of their pre-season results, again, not particularly enamoured by what I've seen. I think they need to prove to me that they've got enough goals in this team to compete. I mean, last season's top scorer, Andy Cooker's gone. Nicky Devlin and Luke Behe, who were, again, not particularly popular with the locals, it has to be said, are no longer there. Kieran Morris is in League One with Tranmere. Joe Edwards, of course, with Plymouth. So they've lost some quality. The guys they've brought in, Luke, I don't know what you think of it. I mean, it seems typical Darryl Clarke. He's gone for some Bristol Rovers mainstays in Stuart Sinclair and James Clark. But again, I'm not sure what he is looking at going forward. I don't see the quality that they need to score enough goals to fire themselves into a promotion campaign.
Absolutely. Walsall, traditionally over the years have done really well in this division and tend to get back to League One quite quickly when they come down. But yeah, no, I agree. I think the two from Bristol Rovers, especially Stuart Sinclair, he's a really good holding midfielder. I think he'll do really well in League Two. But for all their signings, how many of them really stand out? Not too many. And I think we were discussing the other day that you mentioned Matt Sadler. I think he could do a really good job in League Two. So he'd probably be the one that stand out. But Cameron Pring was with us last year. He's still developing on loan from Bristol City. I'm not sure he can take them to the next level, but he's still developing. He's got a bit of athleticism. And they're on the other side at sort of right back, Shea Facey, and again, not entirely sure he's going to be the sort of player that's going to push them towards the playoffs. And another one I know from his time on loan at Cheltenham is Elijah Adebayo, who's very much hit and miss in this division with Swindon and Stevenage since his first loan with Cheltenham from Fulham a couple of seasons ago. So yeah, it hasn't, of all the signings they've made, and they've made an awful lot of them, there's not that many that stand out really.
Yeah, it looks like they're going to have to rely on the sort of coaching ability and managerial ability of which there's plenty of that in abundance with Darrell Clarke to push them higher up the table if they're going to have a successful season. So we have Walsall currently in 16th. In 15th, let's go to Luke for this one.
So yeah, it's Oldham. Sorry, Chris. Place below where they finished last year, and it's such a shame really, because after all those years of being in League One and then having another mid-table season in League Two, we're predicting yet another mid-table season for Oldham, which is a real shame. That being said, recent transfer business has picked up a little bit, I think, for them. No surprise, even though throughout all the managerial sort of movements with Oldham, they still tend to bring in some players that are so hard to pronounce, yet alone know who they are sometimes. However, there's a couple there. Obviously, I mentioned Zach Mills with Morecambe, who's very highly rated. He could be a really good addition. And the other one, obviously, Wilson. Wilson's got bags of pace, who came from Macclesfield. I think that's a smart pickup. Can't say I know too much about Marvin Kokos or I can't pronounce it. One of you are going to have to help me.
Desiree Segbe.
Oh, you beat me to it. I've been practicing that.
Go on then.
Chris.
No, it's fine. It's been said now.
Oh, okay, I've taken his thunder there. That's it. You're the one moment on the podcast of glory, Chris. But again, like Desiree Segbe Azangpo, as I think I'm pronouncing it right. Yeah, I mean, he could be a good player. I mean, he looks like he's got a lot of pace, decent in the air. But again, this is League Two, and it will take him some time to get used to being pushed around by overweight centre backs. So I think it's something.
Instead of Colbert, look good in the air though.
Yeah. Oh dear. I mean, you've got Urko Vera. Yeah. Enough said about him. I don't know. I think there's a couple more transfers needed for Oldham to move up the table. Obviously, the big one, Chris, is in defence. George Edmondson gone to Rangers. A great deal, obviously, been brought in by the club for that. Peter Clark, we believe, will join Fleetwood, but we don't know that for sure, of course. But he is a big loss as well. That is the big hold, isn't it? The centre-back position right now.
Yeah. At the moment, we've got Jamie Stock playing there, who was on loan at Stockport last season, had a superb season there, and obviously won the league in the 6th tier. And he looks like a steady centre half, and I'm quite happy with him being in the first team. But there's no leader at that back. We're relying on the likes of Sonny Seffel, who was on loan at Ashton United last season and was underwhelmed for them, let's say.
Oh dear.
And he seems to be our go-to centre half for this season. Dear. I saw him against Rochdale. He managed 35 minutes before he limped off, and he was not good. So we are really lacking at the back, and going forwards, we look like we've got a bit about us, but I think we still need another couple of players in midfield as well.
Yeah, a bit of creativity needed after Jose Baxter, of course, has gone and signed for Plymouth today. So, and obviously Dan Gardner moving to familiar grounds with Chesterfield. So yeah, that's the gaps that need filling before we're convinced that Oldham can do anything more than sort of lower mid-table again this season. In 14th, Chris, who do we have in 14th?
Carlisle, which is perhaps disappointing for them to hear after they sort of flirted with the playoffs a bit last season. But I maintain that I don't think Presley's good enough as a manager. It appears the board aren't quite giving him the backing that he would like, and there's apparently been a little bit of infighting over that. And they're signing a lot of players on 1-year deals, which tends to scream out there's a lack of long-term planning. When you've got a lot of players on 1-year deals, they tend to not have a great affinity for the club as players that are on 2 or 3 year deals. I just don't think they've got enough to really make a promotion push this season.
Yeah, and the fact that he said, I think it was today even, that they need 3 more strikers just tells you how sort of brittle their attack is right now. I mean, Hallam Hope is still there. Jack Bridge, I think, needs to work a lot harder before I'm convinced that he can be a real big impact player. Obviously, Byron Webster had the pleasure of speaking to pre-season, and I think he knows that they need some more bodies in before that they will push further forward. I think he's quietly confident, though, that they might shock a few people. They've worked extremely hard in pre-season. And although you're not a big fan, Matt, perhaps of Stephen Presley, I think he's an affable guy and he has a style of play which would work, but I'm not at this moment convinced he's got the squad to pull it off. So right now, as it stands, we have Carlisle in 14th place. In 13th place, we have Cheltenham Town. And as much as I'd like to spout on about them, I think let's go to the expert and say, Luke, we have them in 13th, and you're not too dissatisfied with our decision there.
No, absolutely not. I think, it'll be our highest finish since the playoff seasons under Mark Yates. And if we did indeed get 13th, and I think after the way we finished last season and under Michael, there's no reason why we can't push on a little bit higher. However, it's currently, we're going to be working with a very small squad this season. Currently, there's a few more players, obviously, that are going to come in before the close of the transfer window. But even with those coming in, we'll still have a pretty small squad by and large. So I think the key thing is Michael's gone with quality over quantity this season, which last season it tended to be certainly quantity over quality,
which
at
didn't
the start
work
of the
out
campaign.
at all well.
No, exactly. We had a lot of players, and slowly over the summer, those players have moved on to pastures new. But the key thing is there's been a lot of continuity with the players that finished last season that had earned their right to play for the club and settled into that 3-5-2 system, and a good group of lads that are quite close knit. So I think that, and with the additions of Rowan Ince, who's already starting to show his quality in pre-season as a holding midfielder. I think the focus for Charlton this year is playing sort of with Ince sitting in front of the back five, and then two more central midfielders pushing on. Ryan Broom seems to have been converted into the central midfield now, with Kevin Dawson moving to Forest Green, and I think Broom can get that sort of add that energy that Dawson brought to the team, and he's a very fit player as well. And also, I think, that the jury's out to perhaps look for a little bit more creativity in midfield, but we've got Chris Clements in there, Connor Thomas too, so I think another midfielder might be on the cards perhaps. But I think by and large, Ruben Reid may be injured, but Tavon Campbell, Alex Adai, Luke Varney, George Lloyd is not a bad front line at all. And Luke Varney looks really sharp in pre-season. He's 36 going on 37, and to be fair, he plays like he's in his early 20s, so it's really good to see him, and hopefully he can fire in the sort of goals that he did last season as well.
Okay, so there we go. We have Cheltenham in 13th. As we move into the top half of the table, the team that we think will be bottom of that top half is Stevenage. This is one of the hardest ones to pick in this position, because I think Stevenage are one of those sides that have a lot of potential, but given the competitive nature of the league this season, and just the fact that they do have a small budget, they've got to work with it. I think 12th is currently where we see them being. I'd like to see them have a bit more going forward. Obviously, Ilias Chen not going to come back, and he was such a big player in their successful sort of end of season run-in. We do like Dean Parrott. I think he's a good player at this level, coming back to the club after having success there. Paul Digby, I'm a big fan of Paul Digby. I think he's a big guy, offers a lot, deserves a bit of a chance. But like Chris, we're just not quite convinced there's enough there. I mean, they need Danny Newton to hit the form of a season ago, because he struggled last year with fitness at times.
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said there. I think it'll be a very similar season to last year, but they're obviously missing the likes of Elias Chair, and it's going to be a big miss for them. And they might flirt with the playoffs a little bit, but they need some more flair players, I think, if they're going to really push any higher than 12th.
So we have Stevenage in 12th. Again, part of me slightly uneasy about that. I think we sort of all had them pushing around the playoffs, but none of us quite had them in. I think, Luke, you were the keenest on them. You had them making the playoffs, but we sort of talked you down a bit. So for Stevenage fans' sake...
And I got my way. I said 12th.
Yeah. I think you and I both had them in 12th. I think Luke had them higher. So for Stevenage fans' sake, let's hope that Luke is right and proves us both wrong. But at the moment, we have them in 12th. In 11th, Chris, who's in 11th?
Salford, perhaps a little bit surprisingly. A lot of people touting them for big things this season. And they certainly have some of the players that will give them credentials as a sort of promotion side. I think Danny Lloyd's a superb player. They've got Rooney up front. They've got a lot of quality there, but I think there'll be a little bit of adjusting to League Two life. The fan base is somewhat, is still quite small for this level, and I think that can sort of play an effect, especially when they go to the likes of Bradford. I think that might prove difficult for them. And overall, I think it will just be a season of settling, flirt with the playoffs a little bit, but nothing too great for them.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think Salford have some excellent attacking options. Like we said, they've got Gaffney in there. They've got Devante Rodney, who was, I think, he was a great player for Hartlepool, or showed some promise there at one time. So, I mean, they do have an interesting attack. Richie Tower, one player we should mention, is a fantastic midfielder. That was a real coup. And Oscar Threkeld as well is a big signing. But overall, I think it's more difficult than you can imagine for sides sometimes to come straight up. I mean, even that great Lincoln side didn't quite have enough to make the playoffs in their first season up. Tranmere did it. I think James Norwood proved to be the difference for them, and I'm just not convinced that they've got that kind of player. I mean, love to see Danny Lloyd back though in the Football League. I thought it was such a tragedy that he had to, or chose to, perhaps his own choosing, but to drop out. It's an exciting project that tempted him at the time, but great to see him back in the league. But yeah, I think Salford will have a solid season. At times, like Chris says, flirt with the playoffs, but we've got them in 11th. In 10th, and Luke, we'll go to you for this one, and I have a feeling this is exactly where we had this team last season in our preview pod. And a lot of criticism we got for it as well, I remember, but in fact, we were probably giving them too much credit last season, but perhaps not this year. Who is it in 10th, Luke?
It's Northampton Town. Yeah, I think that's a really good summary there, James, because I think this year they probably do warrant perhaps finishing in that sort of high, not quite in the playoffs area. And yeah, it's the Cobblers, and they got a lot of early business done in this transfer window, and players that really did stand out. And I think a lot of fans were thinking, wow, they've gone for it. Keith Curle has a certain way of playing. He has a certain sort of playing the players he goes for to fit his system. And I think there's a lot of players that stand out for me in their signings. Perhaps a lack of firepower. I know Harry Smith is going to be a very useful player at 6'5" for them. He's probably not going to be their goal getter, but he'll be a good foil for the other players in the team in the 3-5-2 kind of system. But Chris Lyne, great experience. Matty Warburton, exciting player coming from Stockport, scored plenty of goals. And Alan McCormack. Sorry?
He's a fabulous player, Matty Warburton. I saw him a couple of times for Stockport. They've got an excellent player there, I think.
I think he's going to be the one they rely on to be their creative fulcrum, because for my opinion on this is that with a team full of sort of quite good, talented, experienced players, like, my only question is, like, where's their flair? Where's their creativity? Yeah. A little bit like Grimsby. And, Matty Warburton did it very well for Stockport. You think, Chris, you're confident he'll do it at this level, but we have seen players struggle to do it at this level. And all these new additions as well, it's taken time before. But, like, you're big on Alan McCormack, though, aren't you, Luke? He's a very good player.
Yeah, he is absolutely a fantastic pickup just to sit there in midfield. And obviously we know how good Nicky Adams is. And he can play a number of positions, but it'd be really good as on one of the flanks, sort of a wide wing back. So yeah, and I think a couple of them, Reece Hall Johnson, he's another one who can push. And Verdine Oliver, interesting pickup, but a very Keith Curle signing. In that sense, he's not got a brilliant goal record, but I think he'll be kind of a backup to Smith to kind of win headers. And I think the one thing they kind of need now is just that player to sit up top alongside Smith that's going to bang in the goals. And if they can find that key player, then maybe they might just go a little bit further than what we predict them. But only time will tell on that one, of course.
Indeed. So we've now reached 9th. And who have we got in 9th, Chris?
Exeter City. Perhaps this is sort of one that I think we all had a little bit of a discussion about, because we see them as a team that can potentially break into those playoffs. But I think they've lost their goalkeeper Pym, who I think was excellent for them last season. They've got a good squad, but I'm not convinced it's much better than they had last season, and they were again around the playoffs but not quite in them. Nicky Ajose, I think, is an excellent signing for them. But other than that, there's nothing that's really grabbing me and saying they will be, securing the playoffs throughout the season. I think they've got a chance at it, but it's a slightly outside chance.
Yeah, I think they'll be similar to last season, to be honest. And I think the only thing that puts me off them is not anything particularly about their squad. I just think that there's probably 8 squads better than them in League Two. It's such a competitive division this season. So, but Lewis Ward, I think, will come in and do very, very well. He's a good prospect from Reading as a goalkeeper. Tom Parks knows this division really well. Alex Fisher started excellently at Yeovil, pitted out at the end of the season. Gary Warren hit and miss a little bit in defence. Started well with that partnership with Omar Swamney at Yeovil, but again he didn't quite finish the job and they ended up getting relegated. Nicky Ajose, well, it depends who you speak to about this guy. Swindon fans probably remember him very fondly. Charlton fans can't stand him. He's got a reputation for being lazy. Now, I'm not sure Matt Taylor will accept that, and he'll have to probably try and push him. But with Bowman and Ajose, you think there's going to be goals in there. But as it stands at the moment, I just think they will be just on the outside looking in. But, it's going to be tight, and I think Exeter are a very good team. And a team I really do like. It's just not quite there for me at this moment in time. In 8th, as we move into the team that will just miss out on the playoffs. And this one was really hard to pick because Luke was hugely keen on these and had them in the automatic places. Chris had them, I think...
7th.
I think you had them. Yeah, I think you had them making the playoffs. I'm not yet convinced. It's Swindon Town. We think they'll finish 8th. We've sort of compromised our views a little bit on this one. But I think Richie Wellens is a very bright coach. I think he knows exactly how he wants his team to play. Whether or not he's got the business over the line that he wanted, I don't yet know. I think they need a little bit more to convince me that they're going to fire themselves into real contention this season. They won't be far off it, though. I think Jerry Yates is a brilliant signing. I think he was so good at Carlisle last season, and there was certainly a lot of interest in him. Matthew Baudry did well in his time at Notts County. Zeki Fries is well thought of as well. Rob Hunt, been there, done that. He's a good fullback, but I just think they might lack a little bit of quality. Doherty's an excellent midfielder. If he can sort of have the same sort of beginning to the campaign that he did last season, then you never know. But I just think they might not have quite enough just yet to get into those playoff places. Luke, you liked them though, and you were the one we had to convince the most perhaps to bring them down a peg. What is it you see in them that you think we might have underrated them slightly?
I think there was times at last season that they were quite brilliant. Obviously, they never seemed to fare well against Cheltenham, but they've got some tremendous pace in that front three, and it was just starting to click at times. And I look at the likes of Woolery and Robinson, and just the movement of them really is quite exciting. I think if you get the team behind them, Wellens it was a bit of an unhappy end to the season. There was a lot of players Wellens was looking to get rid of, and he's starting to bring in those players. I think they kept Doughty, which is a good player to keep, and they've added with those players we've talked about there. I just think they're one of those sides that they got a lot of potential to be successful, and they've probably got the quickest front line in the division in terms of pace. Perhaps not in sort of finishing ability yet, but for me, that's why I just fancied them to do really well next season. But that's obviously just my opinion.
Well, we'll see. You might be right. We might be wrong. But at the moment, we have Swindon in 8th. Right. We're moving into the playoff places now. And in 7th place, just squeaking in. Luke, who do we have in 7th?
We've got the Bantams, Bradford City, another team that always seem to do well in League Two when they come back down. They've got an absolutely terrific manager in Gary Bowyer, who's done a really good job in this division before, as we all know. But the reason why we've put them just inside the playoffs is perhaps they lack that sort of pace in the team. I think the one player that can sort of add that is Zeli Ismail, who's come in. But apart from that, there's a lot of experienced heads, but perhaps lacking that sort of pace, as I say. Or at least though, there's 3 or 4 players coming back from injury that should be ready for the start of the season. Important players, including him. But they have been busy. Richards Everton is but monstrous in terms of size defender who comes from Accrington. He's a good addition in my opinion. Obviously the 2 big ones for me in terms of names is Clayton Donaldson, James Vaughan coming in. Which are 2 very big names and for a League Two level at least, but whether they've still got the athleticism for this level, I'm not entirely sure. And that's probably why, because we were talking a minute ago, obviously, about teams that wouldn't get in because of how good other team squads are, probably why we've put them where they are, because I think a few people would have perhaps had them a little bit higher.
Well, Chris, you were very keen on them. You actually thought they might win this league.
Yep.
I think I can see your point. Excellent manager, a lot of business done. I still think, though, like, it's a massive transition, so it might just take them that little bit of time.
I don't know. I'm still pretty confident that this is the one. I'm still quite confident they might actually make the automatics. I just think they've got good attackers. I think Matt Palmer's a superb central midfielder. I saw him play for Oldham in League One, and he looked one of the better midfielders in that league. I thought Bradford showed a lot of glimmers last season once the off the field issues began to settle. And I think now they've actually had a settled summer, they're able to regroup, build a stronger squad. I don't think they'll have too much trouble.
We'll have to
They've
wait
got
and
an
see.
excellent fan base as well.
Yeah,
They do. They
incredible.
do. And they're a good club in terms of the way that they make their season tickets affordable, which I think is very commendable. Because football is an expensive game, and I think bringing in fans through the gate at affordable prices is something that clubs don't often do often. They don't do it often enough for me, and I think it's important for families especially to be able to afford to go to football. So big credit to Bradford there. But as it stands, despite Chris's reservations, we have them in 7th. In 6th, I'm a bit keener on this side than probably both of you. But in 6th we have Crewe Alexandra, a team that really bossed this division in the second half of last season. Were woeful on the road, but excellent at home. They've kept almost the entirely same squad together, but I think made improvements possibly in key areas. I really do like the fact they've got these young players like Harry Kirk, who's an excellent winger. I like the fact that they've got Callum Ainley. I mean, he's one of my favourite players at this level. I think he's a brilliant midfielder. But they've also got Perry NG, a player who opposition fans love to hate, it appears, from some of the stuff we saw on Twitter. But I mean, he is an excellent defender, another young guy, still probably not at his peak yet. And they've signed, I think Ollie Lancashire's a good addition to the team. I've heard questions about his fitness in pre-season. But Daniel Powell will ably support the side, playing as either sort of an out-and-out forward or a guy on the right. And I think Crewe have got a manager in David Artell who's fairly realistic. I mean, he knows what he wants to do. He keeps his young players well looked after. He doesn't get carried away when they're doing well. He tries not to let them get too downhearted when they have difficult periods, because as a young team they will have periods of inconsistency. But I really do like how they have kept this team together, and I think sustainability. They are a club that do that very well. And I think, as well as keeping the team together and not having too much of a change. I don't know what you think, Luke. I'm just a bit keen on them this season.
Yeah, definitely. I think the good point you make there is it's another year of development for them, isn't it? I've made it quite clear in the past that I really admire the way that Crewe and Colchester have brought players through and in this division as certainly of their own and made squads out of players that have come from their own. Certainly Crewe more than any other team. Yeah, definitely. You've certainly had them higher than Chris and I did. However, you may be right. I think they've kept, as you say, some of those really quality players that will surely make them a lot of money in years to come. And they've got a few. I mean, like you say, Perry Ng is a defender. I think Pickering's still there as well. Who's a really talented player. It's
Ryan Wintle, another one. James Jones in midfield. I mean, they've got a lot of good young players who have had another year of League Two football under their belts, and it wasn't a bad year at all. I mean, at one point, if they had a better away form last season, let's not beat around the bush, they would have been in the playoffs, in my opinion.
Yeah, they very well could have been. Absolutely, no, totally agree with you. Maybe again, it's that case of just that little bit of experience. It's always been the case with Crewe that they may need to just get them over the line. But yeah, we've stuck our necks out and gone for them in 6th place. We
have indeed. I'd like to see them sign one more striker. I think Sean Miller going might be them making a little bit of budget room available, because Chris Porter's getting on a bit. But yeah, I think that's the only question mark I had was like, who's going to score their goals. But it could be one of the cases where they get it from all over the team, and we'll have to wait and see. But at the moment, we have Crewe in 6th. In 5th, Luke, who do we have in 5th?
Yeah, it's Newport County, the Exiles. Saw them in the playoff final last year in their end. And yet, what a brilliant, another brilliant season. They seem to go one step further every season. Can they go one step further next season and get promotion this time, which would be an amazing achievement for the city? Perhaps maybe a surprise to some people, but I'm sure Newport fans think they've been underrated for so long. So 5th place is quite lofty, but we've gone for them here. And for me, the one thing that Michael Flynn tends to get right is recruitment. He's even when he loses top players, they've lost the likes of Dan Butler, who was exceptional last season. He brings players in. They've got, I'm really bad at pronunciation, but they've got a couple of very towering centre backs who have come in. A few players from non-league as well. I think Whiteley, one of them, he's really good. And when he gets the ball, he can run at players and really terrifies defenders. So he could be a really good signing. Tom King's come in to replace Joe Day, who went to Cardiff, and I think he's an adequate goalkeeper. He's had Football League experience. Ledbetter at Bristol Rovers, again, another experienced players. They always bring in loanees, like they have with Nurse from Bristol City. Ryan Haynes, someone I know you like the look of. It's smart recruitment, but for me, the key thing is they've kept that strong midfield, and both Padraig Amond and Jamil Matt were very important for them last season as a partnership up front, and especially Jamil Matt, who hasn't played this well in years, as he does for Newport County. So, yeah, we've gone for them in 5th place, and I think it'll be another really exciting season for Michael Flynn and a city that certainly gets behind its football club.
Yeah, Lazar Stojanovic, who they've signed from Millwall. No, he's a good player though. Not being funny. I obviously know Woking quite well, and he came through their ranks before getting a contract at Millwall. Obviously, quite a difficult team to get into, Millwall in the Championship. They've got some very good defenders, so this could be an interesting pickup. Obviously, Carl Howkins from West Brom. I think he could be good. I've not seen enough of him to say that I think he's the best of signings, but I think he will give them some depth. Tom King, though. If you're going to lose Joe Day, signing Tom King, he's going to come in as the number 1 for sure. He was excellent in his spell at Wimbledon. And again, I think that's a brilliant bit of recruitment. And Ryan Haynes will certainly offer them something on the left side to make up for Dan Butler leaving. So, I'm pretty keen on this Newport side. And I think the biggest most important thing for them is they've just, they don't change too much. They've got Michael Flynn as their manager, and they're just ticking over nicely. And it could be another good season for the Exiles. Just missing out on the automatic places, Chris. Who do we have in 4th?
Well, I'm going to have to ask Luke to cover his ears because we've gone for Forest Green Rovers, and I think they've got a good squad to them. I spoke a lot about them last season, how much I liked their style of football. I think the way the club's run, no pun intended, is quite sustainable. But I think they've got.
I'm saying nothing.
I think they've got a good squad depth. Where they are really lacking at the moment is a goal scorer.
I thought you were going to say where they're really lacking at the moment is in meat products in the half-time team.
That's no problem for me, James.
Yeah.
I think Christian Dodge, obviously, as we expected, has moved on, but they did become a little bit reliant on him in the second half of the season for some goals. So I'd like to see them sign a goal scorer, but assuming they do that, I think they'll be right up there. And I wouldn't actually be too surprised to see them sneak into the top 3.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too surprised. I think they've got Mark Cooper. They've got a great chairman. Whether you like his sort of outlook on the world at all, that doesn't matter. In terms of football, he gives his manager his backing. He never puts him under pressure with needless sackings, and they've had progress year on year since he's been there. So that is something that deserves huge credit. But I think they're linked with Matt Stevens of Peterborough as coming in perhaps as their number 9, because they don't actually have a number 9 in the squad at the moment, which is the only reason that I think we've kept them out of our top 3. But I do think that they have signed some interesting players. Aaron Collins is going to be their number 10, and I think that's a superb signing. He was excellent for Morecambe, and I think Morecambe were quite gutted to see him go, to be honest. Matt Mills coming in from Pune City, a very experienced centre-back, played at a much higher level. Kevin Dawson, like Luke said earlier, energy in midfield. Liam Kitchen's an interesting one from Leeds as well. He's pretty highly thought of, and I just like the fact that Mark Cooper knows how to get his sides playing decent football. Obviously, Reece Brown is a big loss, but you think they've got, probably with Carl Winchester and people in midfield, enough quality there to maintain a good campaign this year. I know they're looking for another goalkeeper. Obviously, James Montgomery was allowed to go to Fylde, and I think goalkeeper has been a real problematic area for them.
I think Smith will be their number one though. With his experience in League Two, I think the one thing they needed was to get a permanent goalkeeper, because they've had a lot of loanees and it hasn't quite worked. The way they play out from the back, they tend to go with distribution, but these goalkeepers have tend to make mistakes. I think Smith could actually end up being quite a solid signing for them.
Sign me up.
Yeah, Mr. 6'5". He's a good keeper. So signed from Bristol Rovers as well. So he's had a little bit of experience at a higher level. So we have them in 4th place. Now let's move on to our top 3. Who do we think is going to finish in 3rd place? I'll let you answer this one, Luke.
Yep, that's Colchester United. For us, I think it's been sort of their recent transfer activity has really impressed, because they've obviously had two highly thought of players leave the club in Frankie Kent and Sammy Smodics, and that's brought in a bit of money, and they've certainly been flexing that money and investing it straight back into the side in what is already a pretty solid team. Especially when you look at the fact that they've got Luke Norris, when he's fully fit, can do a real job for them. But the one that we talked about earlier, Giovanni Brown, is an absolutely outstanding pickup. I thought he'd go to League One if he was going to go anywhere. A really good signing for them to kind of sort of replace that creativity of Smodics in midfield. They've got some really good players in there. Cowan Hall from Wickham, I was surprised to see them let him go. He's got pace to burn. He's got a good record in this division. I think the attacking players is what makes Colchester seem exciting enough to make the top 3 for me. And obviously I know there's been links with him potentially leaving, but Courtney Senior's a brilliant dribbler of the ball. Omar Sawumni, someone James loves very much, a very, very big, strong centre-back who's coming from Yeovil, and someone I like is Luke Gambin, who I think will place Dickinson as sort of a wing-back, and Gambin is a more
versatile as well, isn't he, Gambin? He can play sort of anywhere across that front 3, and I think last season they just didn't have enough depth, and it showed when they had key injuries. But what they've done this season is, obviously Dylan Barnes has gone for a fee, Sammy Smodics has gone for a fee, Frankie Kent has gone for a fee, and they've got a goalkeeper in Dean Gherkin I think they can probably rely upon this season. I think there's a little bit of debate about whether Dylan Barnes or Rennie Gilmartin were good enough throughout the entire campaign. I think they had good spells, and I think that was echoed by their assistant manager when I spoke to him earlier this season. But yeah, I think Dean Gherkin's a big pickup. Giovanni Brown, I absolutely love that signing though. I think he's such a good player. Very shocked, I think most people were, to see him stay at this level. A lot of people perhaps aren't keen on Colchester. I just think they'll do well. Danny Collins is a young centre-back that actually went out to Stuttgart to play his football, and he is one they're keeping an eye on for the future. But I expect we'll have a very similar setup to last season, but just with more depth, and that could be key to getting them over the line when they go through those difficult periods, if they have injury problems. So we have them in 3rd place. In 2nd place, we have Plymouth Argyle. I know there's a lot of thought about, they've had a lot of different players come in, a lot of transition, but basically they've got a manager who got promoted automatically last season. He's brought a huge amount of players that were promoted automatically with him down to this level from Bury. They've signed today Jose Baxter to add that little bit of creativity that they've lost with Graham Carey. That's Chris just dribbling over his microphone there. And Ruben Lemire is obviously gone. So, yeah, I think it's a good squad. And Chris, Jose Baxter, tell Plymouth fans what they can expect from him.
Well, last season he was quite quiet. He's got a little bit of a fitness issue, but
don't come in and underplay it now. Give me a big up.
Hang on a minute. Let me carry on. But if he's fit, he's possibly the best player easily the best player in League Two, I think, and one of the better ones in League One if he's fit. His ability to just pick a pass is, I'll struggle to see any better player at picking a pass than he is. He can shoot. He's the whole package you're looking for out of an attacking midfielder, providing you can keep him fit.
Yeah, I think it's a very good squad. My only thoughts, Luke, perhaps weakness-wise, defence. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. As we've just been talking about, they brought in all these sort of attacking players, and pre-season really hasn't actually been that. I know pre-season it's not about results. but it hasn't exactly been brilliant for them. But yeah, no, I think you've pretty much hit the nail on the head there. Defence could be the issue. I don't think, apart from Fadzian, I don't think any.
Well,
And Amoson's obviously come in. He's not a bad addition, but apart from that, they haven't really done anything else to that back line yet, and that could be the key for them. If they do that, then I think if they sort that defence out, that's why we put them second place, because I think they'll have the quality to do it. But yeah, it's a good shout from you there.
Yeah, really like this team. Really like the manager. I hope they have enough goals in them to achieve where we expect them to be. But like I said,
losing Ladapo 19 goals. I mean, it's a big miss, isn't it? Really,
£500,000 for him, though.
Have they got the scorer?
I think that £500,000 though. I'd take £500,000 for Ladapo personally.
All day long.
Yeah, I think that, and I think
Daylight
they will.
robbery.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Rotherham fans turn off now. Rotherham fans turn off now. We should have I'll put a little pre-warning in there for Rotherham fans, or bleep it out or something for Yorkshire listeners. But no, I think they've got that money though, and they probably will bring in another couple of forwards, another couple of players to give them that rounded depth. But at the moment, I think Plymouth Argyle, for me, have got a good quality squad and an excellent manager. So that is why we have them second, and that leaves just one team. And Luke, who do you think will win the division this year? Finally.
Yeah, Mansfield Town, and given the expectation, and given the budget especially, that they ought to go up this year. So yeah, no, it is the Stags, and they've kept the bulk of last season's team. Really, the key thing was they lost key loan players, Grant, especially Tyler Walker. But they've come in, they brought in Nicky Maynard, who's outstanding for Bury, certainly not past it. Up there with Luke Varney in terms of he didn't have a club up until September. And then
Oxford United decided not to offer him a contract.
Clever move.
Yeah, what a move.
It's amazing, really, how these players have then turned out to be, especially Maynard, obviously, because he helped fire Bury to promotion, that they are good enough. Good enough for this level and more. And I was surprised to see him stay in League Two, but we all know Mansfield have got a bit of backing behind them, and he would have made him an offer, a good offer for what they would have promised as promotion again next season. So
worst welcome video on the planet ever made, though, for his signing.
Let's not talk about that. That was cringeworthy. I don't think Maynard found that too comfortable doing as well, did he?
I've never seen a person look more uncomfortable in my entire life.
I did feel for him. I really did. Dreadful stuff. But if that's their only faux pas, then they'll have a good season.
Got it out of the way early.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And with Andy Cook up front with him, who's coming from Walsall, they're two strikers that I think will complement each other really well in the side, and they have got a lot of good creative players. And one that I quite like that just may have gone under the radar is Dion Donahue, who I think, we all know Portsmouth have aspirations of reaching the Championship in League One, but I think he's a good fullback that I think could do a good job in League Two. So yeah, we'll see. But yeah, we've gone with the Stags to win the league at last.
At last, yeah. I mean, the Stags fans will be banging their heads on the table if they don't do it this season, because of course they've got the squad to do it. They've kept the bulk of that team together. Maybe Flitcroft was the problem. It'd be interesting to see how Dempster, who I watched play for Oxford, he was dreadful, frankly, for Oxford. Never impressed at all as a player at Oxford United. One of his, I think, most memorable aspects of his game was, I think he got sent off for punching someone at Rushden, and I was at that game, and it was highly frustrating for everyone involved. But he didn't have a great time as a player. But good young coach potentially, been coaching some of the younger players, so he will have a handle on those young players that can come in and contribute. Andy Cook, remember, I think he scored 17 goals in League One last season, and I think they lacked that physicality. I think they lacked, a lot of the time I watched them last season, they lacked a focal point to bring people into play, and he could be that perfect foil. So we'll have to wait and see, but as it stands, we have Mansfield finishing as the winners of League Two in 2019-20. Right, that's it. So there we go. Those are our picks. I will be interested to see what you guys think of them. Get in touch with us on Twitter at D3D4 Football and let us know what you think. Go easy on us if we haven't rated your team quite as high as you perhaps like. But I will stick a caveat and say it's a bit strange this season having such a long part of the transfer window still open as we go into the season. I'm not a big fan of it. I understand why it's done, but I do kind of prefer it to be shut when the season kicks off, but it's not financially, perhaps in the market, it's not realistic for League One and 2 teams to have that as it stands. But yeah, so there you go. So if you've enjoyed this podcast, I ask you to give it a rating on iTunes. We'd love you to do that for us. It's all volunteer run. If you want to join the Patreon campaign, we'd again very much appreciate that. And I appreciate the time of both Chris Stringer and Luke Saunders, who have again been brilliant co-hosts for this podcast. Chris, thank you very much for joining, and let's hope we don't get too much flack for what we've just said.
Fingers crossed. I don't think there's anything too outrageous in there, but really enjoyed it as always.
And Luke, as always, mate, brilliant to have you on.
Thank you very much, guys. Yeah, really enjoyed it, and I think it's good. We've got some bold picks in there, and it'd be boring if everyone predicted the same, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it certainly would. And if you're waiting for our League One preview podcast, it'll be just me and Chris because Luke's decided that he has to work. Tut. So it'll be me and Chris bringing you that. That should be out for you guys on Sunday. Until then, though, it's goodbye from all of us. Take care, everyone.